You're listening to Unlocking Vulnerability, a podcast produced by Helen, helping you better understand consumer vulnerability. Hello, I'm Helen and welcome to Unlocking Vulnerability. In this episode, I'm really delighted to welcome my special guest, Vanessa Hudnott. Vanessa is the Vulnerable Customer Strategy Manager at Aviva, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you join me, Vanessa.
Hi, Helen. Thank you. Thank you for asking me to take part.
You're very welcome. So, Vanessa, do you want to start by just sort of telling us a little bit more about yourself and your role at Aviva?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm currently jointly leading the Vulnerable Customer Strategic activity for Aviva, but my particular focus is training, operational support, and the embedment of our vulnerable customer policy into our culture, so that ultimately it will become business as usual. That's our aim. That's what we're aiming to do.
Brilliant. That sounds fantastic. Obviously, we're recording this. We're in the middle of the coronavirus. We're in the middle of lockdown. Consumer vulnerability has significantly shifted and intensified since the outbreak, really. What changes have you and your team had and seen over the past few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, there are many challenges facing our customers as a result of the pandemic, but financial hardship is the top challenge we're seeing from customers right now. And this is showing itself in the form of customers cancelling insurance products, requesting payment breaks, withdrawing or moving funds due to panicking about their situation or panicking about how the stock market is performing. And we're also seeing situations where customers are experiencing delays when they need certain documents such as death certificates, powers of attorney, medical certificates, that kind of thing. And in the middle of all of this, when customers are in many cases experiencing such turmoil and trauma, we've also seen reports of a significant increase in scams targeting consumers, particularly those using coronavirus as a hook to entice potential victims.
That's shocking, isn't it? I mean, I've seen things on the news about scams, and I've actually put together a little infographic about scams and how it's affecting people.
Yeah, it is truly shocking, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. So there's lots of financial scams that you're seeing. Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
Wow. Thinking about your staff, then, obviously these are sort of extreme cases and unprecedented times. I think that's the phrase of the moment, isn't it? What tools and training are you providing your staff to actually sort of help them engage with customers, especially those who are now potentially vulnerable?
Well, our vulnerable customer strategy has 4 key pillars, and one of them is training and development. The programme's quite extensive, but I'll just run through some highlights if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Well, all our new staff receive vulnerable customer induction training, and this is followed by annual interactive refresh training, which is updated every year to reflect what we're seeing through customer feedback, our own internal data, and of course what's happening externally in the world, such as the current crisis. We have a network of vulnerable customer leads and champions who have received additional training, and they're able to support customer-facing staff, either in their own teams or virtually through using specific Skype groups and forums. In the current climate, it has become even more essential that we focus on defining customers' need, though, and understanding the layers of vulnerability.
That's really important, isn't it? I mean, all those different, layers of vulnerability and, just giving the staff the tools that they need to just, engage.
The virtual tools we had in place before the pandemic hit, and they were well used then, but you can imagine they've absolutely come into their own, obviously, since, most of our staff, all our staff are now home working. So they have become very essential.
Absolutely. I mean, that should be the case. So you've just mentioned then that actually the staff are now working from home. So are all your team obviously now working from home?
All of them are, and actually the migration of staff to working from home was fairly straightforward. And I'm really proud to say that Aviva have a great staff health and wellbeing programme. But of course there are challenges with staff working from home. Especially for customer-facing staff, the change from being part of a physical team, being able to turn to the person next to you or your leader and have a face-to-face discussion, share concerns, ask questions, to doing this virtually really does require some significant adjustment and a bit of a different mindset, really. But there's some of the ways that we've got around that and tried to make life a little bit easier for them. All the customer-facing staff have regular team meetings, usually daily. They turn on their cameras. They're very much encouraged to take breaks away from their laptops. And our senior leaders, they give live updates where colleagues are encouraged to ask questions. And there's a really good virtual social community as well. So yes, it is different. I mean, working in isolation will affect some people more than others. And some staff I found really enjoy working from home. But for those who live alone, simply not having any physical contact, just a pat on the arm or on the shoulder, it must be really difficult and quite challenging.
Yeah, especially if sort of your team members have built up really good relationships with their colleagues, and just sort of having that banter in between the calls just really does help to ease some of the tension that you feel when you are taking continuous calls with clients.
Yeah,
you do need that downtime, don't you?
You do.
So thinking about the customer conversations that you're having now, sort of obviously there's extreme vulnerability out there. A lot you mentioned financial vulnerability is obviously probably the biggest vulnerability that your staff are dealing with now. How do you feel that the training and the resources that your team have been provided with are now preparing them for the calls that they're going to be taking and the conversations they're having?
Well, I think our approach and the work that we put into our training and tools put us in a strong position to respond to customer circumstances during the pandemic. As an example, we know there is a link between financial hardship and mental health. Add on to that people living in isolation, caring for family members and so forth, will all undoubtedly contribute to customers' distress and their anxiety and mental health problems. So, we knew this before the pandemic hit, and it's been very much focused on in the media. So we've just arranged virtual training sessions on COVID and mental health. And this is going to be delivered by our Chief Medical Officer to all our vulnerable customer champions and leads. And then the session is going to be hosted on our internal VC website, our vulnerable customer website. So it's going to be accessible for all staff. So quite excited to experience that in a couple of weeks. Yeah, and it actually happens to be during Mental Health Week, which was brilliant planning on my part, I would like to say. It wasn't, it's coincidence. But going back to the financial aspect, in these times, we know that some of our customers are experiencing financial hardship as a result of being unable to work or being furloughed. And we're taking some actions to help them. So we're providing support to those customers with home and motor policies by deferring their monthly payments for up to 3 months. And we're asking customers who are struggling to make their monthly payments to get in touch online via our website. We really think that deferring payments is one of the ways we think insurers can really support their customers during these times. And then something else that I think is great, we're offering customers who are NHS workers additional support, such as free breakdown cover, enhanced home insurance for personal belongings and free courtesy cars. But we do have to continually respond and adapt to circumstances and changes we're seeing in the society. And everybody keeps saying the situation's changing practically daily. And I think we've seen that, haven't we?
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, it is. And I mentioned about the mental health being very much in the news. And the other thing that's been very much in the news is the rise of domestic abuse with helplines. Yeah, reporting a real surge in calls. So Aviva started an initiative actually a few months before the pandemic hit, which was working closely with domestic abuse charity, developing training support for staff. And that's for staff who are in a domestic abuse situation, but also to support staff, to support customers who are in this situation. But the current situation with COVID has really accelerated our activity in this area. We just launched the training program last week, and I attended a second session today. It's been really well received. And as you can imagine, it's provoked a lot of discussion.
It's a sort of a challenging topic to cover as well, isn't it? Because you don't know who's actually facing that situation themselves.
Indeed.
So it's a very sensitive, emotive topic of training. That's fantastic, though. And what about with regards to bereavement? Because obviously, sort of death rates have obviously significantly increased. Have you noticed an increase in sort of those who are ringing on behalf of their loved ones that they've lost?
Yes, we have. And I think a company's ability to engage with customers, on a human level, show that real understanding and empathy. It's going to be what sets companies apart, isn't it? From
absolutely.
Traditional, yes. It will be, won't it? From the traditional faceless, commercial-focused organisations. I think customers' expectations of their providers, it's going to change. And they will judge and they'll remember now based on their experiences they're having with us right now.
Yes.
And I would definitely say we've absolutely seen the very best and the very worst of human nature during this time.
Oh, crumbs, yeah. And I think we also are picking up which companies we want to actually, converse with once this is over. Actually, I'm sort of making a bit of a list of companies I'm probably not going to be actively supporting afterwards. And how you deal with customers who are at their darkest place in their lives, how you make them feel and how you make them feel valued at this time, and how you make them feel listened to, is actually going to be the biggest game changer.
Yes,
I think, for
businesses. It really will.
You know, we've got Boris's announcement on Sunday night, whether there's any chance of lockdown being released. But I personally believe we're going to be seeing the impacts of this for a very, very long time. What can organisations learn from this whole situation when it comes to their vulnerable customers, or indeed for all their customers and staff?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you've asked that question, actually. I mean, I think this crisis has shown us that anyone can become vulnerable at any point, and circumstances change so quickly. Customers may have been plunged, into financial hardship because they no longer have a job, or they could find themselves physically isolated from loved ones, which in turn can impact their mental health. And it's interesting because the FCA have always said that 50% of the population could be vulnerable at any one time. And now we're probably seeing, closer to 100%, which means actually we should stop using the word vulnerability. This is about life. It's about circumstances, and it's about customer need, whether that's permanent or temporary. So this is what we should be doing as companies all the time.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Actually, is almost take that word vulnerable out, because ultimately everyone's in this together, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Vanessa, then, really sort of bringing everything that we've talked about to summary, really, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, actually, leading on from my last point, the phrase that this is a marathon, not a sprint, has been used quite a bit about the current situation.
Yes.
But I think it's more likely to be an ultra marathon. You referred to that a bit earlier, actually. And any return to normal will have to be so carefully managed. We're going to need to adopt a new normal in the future and build on the learnings we've discovered during this pandemic. It's so essential. That's my final thought.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. And so far reaching, isn't it? The whole, situation. It's sometimes you just can't fathom it. It's just so enormous, isn't it?
That's right.
That's the thing. So thank you ever so much, Vanessa, for being my guest today. It's been brilliant to have you here and to just have an insight into actually how Aviva are supporting their customers and staff. And can all of this information, if there's any Aviva customers listening to this, is all of this information on your website? Can they easily access all the support they need?
Yes, that's right. It certainly is.
Okay.
Yes.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. So thank you ever so much, Vanessa, for joining me today. And please take care of yourself. Stay well, stay safe, stay home. Remember to subscribe to my podcast and leave a review. You can also follow me on Twitter at @HPettiferTrain, and I look forward to you joining me on my next episode.